Chronic loneliness often begins as a quiet emotional hunger that never fully fades. It is not always about being alone physically, but about feeling unseen and unfelt, even in the presence of others. Conversations may happen, laughter may appear, yet something essential feels missing. The person longs for resonance, for someone to truly recognize their inner world. Over time, this hunger becomes a constant ache, subtle but persistent. The heart reaches outward, then retreats unsure whether connection is possible or safe. Loneliness whispers that needs are too much, that wanting closeness is a burden. The person may grow skilled at appearing fine while feeling empty beneath the surface. This internal contradiction is exhausting. The absence they feel is difficult to name, but it colors everything. Moments of silence feel heavier, evenings stretch longer, and small disappointments cut deeper. Chronic loneliness is not dramatic isolation. It is quiet deprivation. It is the feeling of emotional starvation while surrounded by food you cannot digest. Until this hunger is acknowledged, the person may keep searching externally for what can only begin with being deeply known. One painful sign of chronic loneliness is the persistent sense of being misunderstood. Even when words are exchanged, the person feels as though their meaning never quite lands. They may explain themselves carefully, only to feel unseen again. Over time, this creates a sense of futility around sharing inner thoughts. Why speak if no one truly hears? The person may simplify their expression, hide complexity, or stop trying altogether. This withdrawal is not indifference. It is self-protection. Being misunderstood repeatedly can feel invalidating. One's inner world does not belong anywhere. The loneliness deepens when the person begins to doubt their own clarity, wondering if something is wrong with how they think or feel. Relationships may exist, but emotional attunement feels absent. The person may nod along in conversations while feeling internally distant. This gap between expression and reception becomes a silent wound. Chronic loneliness thrives here, in the space where words fail to bridge hearts. Healing often requires not more talking, but the rare experience of being met with genuine curiosity and care. Chronic loneliness often pushes people into emotional self-reliance that looks like strength but feels like isolation. The person learns to carry their feelings alone, to process pain internally, and to solve emotional struggles without reaching out. At first, this can feel empowering, even necessary. Over time, it becomes a barrier. The habit of handling everything alone makes vulnerability feel foreign or unsafe. Asking for support may trigger shame or discomfort. The person may believe they should not need anyone, or that needing others invites disappointment. This belief slowly closes doors to connection. Emotional self-reliance becomes a rule rather than a choice. Even in moments of deep distress, the person may minimize their pain or distract themselves instead of seeking comfort. Loneliness grows in the absence of shared emotional weight. The heart grows tired from holding everything by itself. What appears as independence often hides a fear of burdening others or being let down. Chronic loneliness thrives when self-sufficiency replaces intimacy, leaving the person strong on the outside but quietly aching within. Another sign of chronic loneliness is being surrounded by surface-level connections that never deepen. The person may know many people, socialize regularly, and still feel profoundly alone. Conversations stay safe, light, and predictable. Deeper topics feel risky or unwelcome. This creates a sense of emotional flatness, where relationships exist without nourishment. The person may play a role, being agreeable, funny, or helpful, while hiding their true feelings. Over time, this performance becomes exhausting. The loneliness does not come from lack of interaction, but from lack of authenticity. The person longs to be known beyond small talk, yet fears rejection if they reveal more. This tension creates distance, even in close proximity. The heart senses that connection is possible, but not happening. Chronic loneliness often hides in plain sight, masked by busyness and social presence. It is the pain of being partially seen, of belonging everywhere and nowhere at once. Without emotional depth, relationships feel hollow, and the longing for real connection intensifies. Chronic loneliness often carries the belief of being easily replaceable. The person may feel that their presence does not truly matter, that if they disappeared, life would continue unchanged. This belief quietly shapes behavior and self-worth. The person may overextend themselves, trying to be useful or agreeable to earn a sense of belonging. Alternatively, they may withdraw, assuming their absence would go unnoticed. Feeling replaceable erodes confidence and deepens isolation. Compliments feel temporary. Attention feels conditional. The person may interpret distance as confirmation that they are not essential. This belief is rarely challenged because loneliness limits corrective experiences. Without consistent emotional bonds, the person lacks evidence of being deeply valued. Over time, they may internalize invisibility as identity. Chronic loneliness is not just about being alone. It is about feeling non-essential. Healing involves experiencing relationships where presence is missed, where absence is felt, and where worth is not dependent on performance or convenience. While loneliness is often associated with sadness, chronic loneliness frequently shows up as emotional numbness. The person may feel flat, disconnected, or indifferent, as if emotions have been muted. This numbness is a protective response, developed to cope with prolonged, unmet needs. Feeling deeply becomes too painful, so the system shuts down. Joy feels distant. Grief feels inaccessible. The person may wonder why they do not react the way they think they should. This emotional blunting can create confusion and self-concern. Others may perceive the person as calm or unaffected, not realizing the emptiness beneath. Numbness creates further isolation because it limits emotional exchange. It becomes harder to connect when feelings feel unreachable. Chronic loneliness thrives in this quiet absence of emotion. It is not the storm of sadness, but the stillness after giving up hope of being met. Relearning how to feel safely is often a key step toward reconnecting with both oneself and others. A deep sign of chronic loneliness is longing that feels unsafe or shameful. The desire for closeness, intimacy, or companionship may trigger discomfort rather than hope. The person may criticize themselves for wanting connection, viewing it as weakness or neediness. This internal conflict creates suffering. The heart wants closeness, but the mind warns against it. Past experiences of rejection or neglect often shape this fear. The person may suppress their longing, distract themselves, or convince themselves they do not need anyone. Yet the longing persists, surfacing in quiet moments. Chronic loneliness grows when desire is treated as a threat. The person becomes divided, one part reaching outward, another pulling back. This tension creates emotional paralysis. Healing involves reframing longing as natural and human, rather than dangerous. When longing is allowed without shame, it can guide the person towards safe, nourishing connections, instead of being buried where it festers. Chronic loneliness often leads to disconnection not only from others, but from oneself. Without meaningful reflection through relationships, the person may lose clarity about who they are and what they feel. Identity becomes vague, shaped more by roles than inner truth. The person may struggle to name their needs or preferences. This self-disconnection makes connection with others even harder. How can one be known if they do not feel known to themselves? Loneliness creates a mirrorless existence, where the self feels blurred. The person may feel hollow or undefined. This disorientation can be unsettling, leading to further withdrawal. Chronic loneliness thrives when the inner world feels inaccessible. Reconnecting with oneself through reflection, creativity, or therapy can restore a sense of solidity. From there, connection becomes more possible. Knowing oneself is often the first step toward being known by others. Another sign of chronic loneliness is heightened sensitivity to rejection, real or imagined. Small cues, delayed messages, changes in tone can feel deeply personal. The person may interpret neutrality as dismissal and distance as abandonment. This sensitivity comes from repeated experiences of disconnection. The nervous system becomes alert to signs of exclusion. While this vigilance is protective, it often amplifies loneliness. The person may withdraw preemptively to avoid being hurt. This avoidance reinforces isolation. Over time, the fear of rejection becomes a self-fulfilling pattern. Chronic loneliness is painful not only because of absence, but because of the constant anticipation of being unwanted. Healing requires experiences of consistent, gentle connection that challenge these expectations and soothe the nervous system. People living with chronic loneliness often experience a persistent sense of being out of sync with the world around them. Conversations seem to move at the wrong pace, either too shallow or too fast, leaving them feeling misplaced. Shared interests rarely align. Humor misses its mark, and emotional timing feels off. It can feel as though everyone else received a map to connection that they somehow missed. This sensation creates a quiet but steady despair, not dramatic, but deeply wearing. Watching others bond with ease can sharpen the pain, leading to questions about what is fundamentally wrong. Over time, comparison settles in, reinforcing the belief of being different in an unfixable way. This belief isolates further, making attempts at connection feel risky or futile. Yet being out of sync is not a personal failure. It often reflects unmet relational needs, environments that did not make space for depth, sensitivity, or slower rhythms. Chronic loneliness reframes difference as defect, when it is often simply healing begins when the person encounters spaces where their pace is not rushed and their presence is not questioned. In those moments, belonging no longer feels forced. It feels natural, steady, and real. Chronic loneliness often carries a quiet grief that has no clear beginning or end. It is the mourning of something invisible, a connection that never fully formed, or a closeness that faded before it could be named. This grief emerges unexpectedly, in fleeting moments, a song, a memory, a shared laugh observed from a distance. Because there is no obvious loss, the sadness feels confusing and difficult to justify. The person may tell themselves they have no right to feel this way, minimizing the ache or pushing it aside. Yet the grief persists, heavy and unresolved. It is the sorrow of unmet emotional needs, of being unseen for too long. Without language, this grief settles into the body, shaping mood and perception. Chronic loneliness thrives in this unacknowledged mourning. Naming it does not erase the pain, but it brings relief through recognition. When grief is allowed to exist without explanation or shame, the heart softens. What was once an unnamed weight becomes something that can be held with compassion. From there, healing can begin, slowly and honestly. At the heart of chronic loneliness lives a complicated blend of hope and resignation. The desire for connection never fully disappears. Even after repeated disappointment, there is still a quiet longing to be chosen, understood, and held emotionally. At the same time, exhaustion settles in. The person doubts whether connection will ever arrive, wondering how many more attempts they can make. This inner conflict creates deep ambivalence. One part reaches outward with hope, while another pulls back to avoid more pain. The cycle of trying and withdrawing becomes familiar. Each new effort requires courage, and each setback deepens fatigue. Chronic loneliness is not a lack of desire. It is the weariness of waiting too long without relief. This tension can feel isolating, as if no one sees the effort behind the silence. Honoring both hope and resignation is essential. Hope reflects resilience, the refusal to fully give up. Resignation reflects survival, the need to protect what remains. When both are acknowledged without judgment, the pressure to force connection eases. From that gentler place, more sustainable and nourishing paths toward belonging can slowly emerge.